Warning. The following video contains strong language that some viewers may find offensive or disturbing.
What's the worst punishment you ever received as a child? My mom found out my sister was suicidal, so she locked my sister in her room with literally nothing but a blanket and maybe an air mattress. She was only let out to use the restroom. Food and clothes were brought up to her and then taken when she was finished. My mom told me about this when I was about 8 or 9. I am 19 now and I have never and will never tell her about any of my mental health issues for fear of my life. I was driven about 30 minutes outside of my city to an isolated, large, and creepy-looking building, which I was told was an orphanage. I was given the choice of telephoning the truth and admitting to something I had not done or being left there. I am 38 and still think about this. From time to time. Update, not to excuse what they did. But my mom and dad both had terrible upbringings with abusive parents. My dad was full of anger and my mom was rather weak and full of shame. I started therapy about 5 years ago and was reaching a point where I was going to decide whether to confront my parents with how I felt about my childhood, or cut them from my life. Then my dad died. With his death, a lot of my own anger about how they'd behaved went. I've been able to be the bigger person with my mom, and set her a better example of how to behave, including how I expect her to behave towards me. Our relationship is stronger than it has ever been and I don't dwell on this event in the same way. I used to be hurt thinking about it. Now I see it as the reactions of angry and scared people to a situation they couldn't control, and resolve to do better myself. My grandparents beating my mother in front of me for me talking to her. I was in their custody and my mother was an addict who they didn't want around and she kept trying to call and come see me. So she came over and my grandparents beat her, broke her jaw and nose, and said it was my fault for talking to her. I was 7. My mom said I couldn't have a best friend anymore because my best friend and I were drawing pentagrams on MS Paint at our after-school program, pretending they were transmutation circles from an anime called Fullmetal Alchemist. Pentagrams are much easier for a 9-year-old to draw than an intricate alchemy array. My mom immediately jumped to this being devil worshipping, despite my friend and I not even knowing what a pentagram really meant. This led to my mom telling every single teacher and after-school care worker not to allow me to be anywhere near my friend. Friend moves away and mom won't let me email her to stay in touch. I'm 24 now and haven't had any close friends since. Christina, if you're out there, I still miss you. Beatings will continue until your morale improves. And all fucking serious. Life got better and I never see my dad anymore and him and my mom ask when I'm having kids and why I haven't seen them in years despite living probably 30 minutes from them. My dad holding me up by grabbing my ear and my foot. Lol, my mom broke the cartilage in my ear like this. It turned blackish and hurt when the wind blew. Thought I had an ear infection. She took me to the doctor. Guy says this shit broke. What happened? I hadn't realized what happened until the doctor asked me. And I thought for a few seconds and saw my mother staring at me. And I went, I fell. I always thought I just saved this bitch a really awkward situation, lol. My mom took everything in my room except a blanket. My radio, books, toys, you name it. I was locked in there for the UK summer holidays. They are 6 weeks long. My mom used to beat 10 bells of shit out of, but being locked in that room the whole summer was probably the worst. I was grounded for 6 months straight, which was me being locked in my room, not an actual physical lock, and I wasn't allowed to leave it except for dinner, the bathroom and to go to school. I had 0 toys. I owned no books. I had nothing to do but get lost in my head, and at one point my radio was taken away, so I was left in complete silence. I was between 10 to 13. Why was I grounded? My dad thought either my brother or I stole his camera and sold it. And until we told him who did it, we were both grounded. Finally, after 6 months, he finally cleaned his room and found his camera and said we were ungrounded. We never even got an apology. After that, my dad continued to ground me for a block of months at a time. I ended up being grounded and isolated for 5 years total between 10 to 13 years old. Being trapped in my head for that long has fucked me up mentally permanently. In the 1980s, my father was a radio man and often had spare parts lying around. Whenever I was rebellious toward him, he was fond of whipping my bare back with metal radio antenna. When I was 8 years old, I had every dish in the house thrown at me, including a loaf of bread. I was then locked outside till midnight. I was first put out in the morning. The pointless ones. We had landscaping rocks in our yard from an unfinished project. They were probably 30 pounds each. After a number of other punishments failed, my parents came up with the move rocks punishment. I'd have to move 30 or so of these rocks 50 yards. Set them up into a particular shape, square, circle, etc., closing parenthesis, comma, have my parents check them and then move them all back. The pointlessness of it all was the worst. My mom pulled down my pants and hit me with the brush side of a hairbrush. In front of my 3 fellow 5-year-old friends. I was innocent. She didn't believe me. That's rough, buddy. My friend's mom was the smartest woman on earth though. Growing up she would reward us with a pack of Pokémon cards for completing a list of chores. But if we were being really misbehaved she would pull out a pack. Open it. Show us the contents of the pack and then rip up the cards. The woman ripped up a fucking Charizard in front of 2 10-year-olds and an 8-year-old. We didn't act out much after that devastating blow. An ass whooping from Dad. That his grip and my trying to run broke my arm. How was that explained to the doctor? I fell off of my bike. I shit my pants in the 4th grade. I don't know why, but I had a condition that made me hold it all in and not use a toilet. This had been going on and off my entire life, not a problem anymore. My dad was furious. I remember being naked in my bedroom with my dad. My dirty underwear was on the floor and my dad had a hard grip on my arm while he screamed and yelled at me. He yelled at me things like, "How old are you? No one is gonna wanna be your friend," and "You're disgusting." He then beat me his belt. My dad worked at a flour mill and spent his days stacking 100-pound flour bags 10 high, so he was built like the fucking Hulk. He would then rub my shit-filled underwear in my face, making me look at it and smell it. Got put on restriction for 6 months for doing something my mom said I could do. But then she said she never gave me permission to do, even though another adult was sitting there and confirmed he heard her give me permission to do it. Also had to pick up all the rocks in the vacant lot next to our house and put them in a pile on weekends as part of the punishment. Hands tied behind my back with a belt so I couldn't cover myself. And then beat about the face, neck and shoulders with another belt for several minutes. Dad was a real piece of shit. Edit, thanks for the kind words. Life got better, red heart. Probably getting strangled by my dad after I stormed away from the dinner table while yelling that I hated eating with my parents because all they did was yell and curse at one another. New to this. When I was in year 2, UK, so 6 or 7 years old. I was an unruly child to say the least. I was undiagnosed ADHD. My mom had enough and told me I was getting adopted. I remember distinctively telling classmates I was leaving to live somewhere else. My mom made me tidy my room and take what I wanted in a bag, and I went to my auntie's house, mom's sister, to wait for the lady to pick me up. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, and woke up in my auntie's spare bedroom. She took me to school that day and my mom picked me up and I went home. As if nothing had happened. Years later, I'm in my late 30s now. I brought this up and my mom. She acts like it never happened. Her words exactly were, "You're living in a fantasy. That never happened." So yeah, that had messed with my head quite a bit. Not me, but one of my siblings. We were quite young and they didn't want to finish all the food on their plate. So my stepdad duct taped them to the dining room chair and wouldn't let them out until they finished. My uncle would have me stand T-pose. And hold books. Not too bad. Then I have to stand on my toes. Then he would put nails sticking up under my heels. He would dare me to relax. Edit, on a related to my uncle note. He also chased me and my cousin, his own child, with a BB gun. and shot at us. He eventually hit my cousin in the eye. The BB got stuck on his eyelid. So thankfully, there was very minimal damage to his eyeball. At Catholic school with nuns as teachers. Those bitches were doing the devil's work. I remember being forced to kneel on hardwood floors on popcorn kernels. While saying the rosary, "Fuck you, Sister Mary Joan, you evil witch." Some guy my mom brought home that she was dating got really drunk and took me in the bathroom and beat me with a belt. He said it would be 20 licks. But he was so drunk he kept losing count. I tried crawling behind the toilet for protection but couldn't fit. That just made him more angry. I tried not to cry because I learned they enjoyed that. But I couldn't help it. I don't remember anything after that. Not sure if that's the worst. But that one came to mind. I was in kindergarten and I had peed myself because I was having too much fun watching a movie in class. The teacher put me in the bathroom with the lights out and door closed for the rest of the movie, 45 minutes or so. And it was storming really badly outside. I'm still afraid of the dark and loud noises. Not me but my son actually. He is a little fella. As are his mother and myself. She would force him to drink nothing but Pediasure with every meal and go ballistic when he would not be able to finish the terrible frozen meal she made him. She sent a message to me saying he was hiding food he didn't want to eat and that she beat his ass and I should expect bruising. The next day my father picks him up and dropped him off to my girlfriend at our house. After dinner she went to put him in the shower and was horrified at what she saw. Imagine a tiny 7-year-old boy with a completely bruised ass. And I mean deep purple, yellow and green bruises. She called me immediately. I rushed home from work. Calling the police on my way. A sergeant from my local PD was very helpful and supportive to my little boy. Told me what to file and how to file it and that I should rush to Children's Hospital. He also called his lifelong best friend who was a captain in the town where my ex-wife lives. Within 2 weeks I had full emergency custody and she had domestic violence charges. Fast forward a year and I'm a sole custodial parent and my son is thriving. He has gained almost 20 pounds. Can now ride a bike without training wheels. He could not ride one at all when we took custody. Good food, positive attention, and lots of love have helped him grow tremendously. 7 years old. I wouldn't move my hands from my butt so my mom dragged me to the bathroom. While there she lifted me up by my legs and attempted to give me a swirly. My hands immediately latched onto the toilet bowl to stop my head from falling in. Then my mom freed up one of her hands to turn my ass red. After a few hits my arms gave out and my head dropped hard into the toilet water. After that she yelled at me for 5 more minutes and ordered me to take a shower. She still denies doing this or any of the other corporal punishment my sister and I were subjected to. Made to drink distilled vinegar. It was probably from ages 5 to 10 that my parents used it as punishment. They would rotate between spanking, whipping our asses with a leather swatches or the branches of our beloved willow tree. Putting us in corners for extended periods of time if we cried or complained. 20 minutes doubled to 40 and so on. Old-fashioned soap. And the God-forbidden vinegar. I still have major teeth and jaw problems at 22. And my stomach, esophagus has never felt normal. I was the youngest of 3 girls in my family. My worst punishment came after my dad left. As a baby, my dad would beat my sisters for any little thing they did wrong but because I was born on his birthday. He saw me as special. My father was a drunk drug addict who brought fear into the home and only I wasn't touched by his fists and feet. My sisters and mom were all victims and while they tended their wounds I was smothered and loved. They hated me for it. Dad left and now no one was protecting me. What was my worst punishment? I was locked up. My mom would lock me in my room for hours and my sisters had free rein on me with their punishments. Every time I stepped out of line, I was reminded how much hate there was. I was beat by my sisters and neglected by my mother. My worst punishment was when I said to my mom that I hated her and the family and I wished they were all dead. She grabbed me by the hair, dragged me into the laundry and locked me in there. The floor was stone and it was winter. I remember being so cold it hurt. I guess I was asleep when I was eventually let out. I hated my punishments. The locking up stopped when I was around 12. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. See you next time.